Hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product here at Alpha Software. And today I'm actually pretty excited about our presentation. Not that I'm not excited every week about our presentations, but today we're going to be going over something that I think is really cool, and that has to do with hosting. Application hosting. In other words, how do you get to your application from the internet, from a local area network, or from really anywhere in the world? Today, we're going to be talking about hosting options. We'll spend just a little bit of time talking about Alpha Cloud, but I have some new stuff to show you and maybe some review for some of you that I think you're going to find interesting. The other thing is we're also here to answer your questions, and we can answer those questions if you type them into the chat box or the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. You can also send your questions into guides, GUIDES at alphasoftware.com. And as I do every week, I'd just like to do a quick audio video check. So if anyone can let me know if they can hear my voice, see my screen, just type that into the questions box and we can get started. Perfect. Thank you very much. Yep, great. We're good to go. So application hosting. We have talked, of course, about Alpha Cloud as an option of application hosting. In fact, if you get the Alpha Anywhere Community Edition, the only place you publish basically is to the cloud unless you update to another version of the developer. But actually, there is something even built into the Community Edition, which I'm going to tell you about, a type of server that you can use. So we also think about serving things from big data centers, and that's certainly the case of Alpha Cloud. It's kept in the AWS infrastructure, locked inside buildings. I've never been in it. Maybe it's not as clean as it looks here in my wonderful stock photo. But Alpha Anywhere doesn't have to just be served from big monster data centers. You can do it, as I'm going to show you today, on a little tiny computer, as long as it's just running on an 86 sort of version, not the ARM version of Windows. So basically any PC. What I'm pointing to here in this blurry photo is a cheap form factor HP PC that I bought used probably 3 years ago now, and I think I paid about $200 for it. It runs Alpha Anywhere beautifully. Now, would I want it as my enterprise system with thousands of users? No, that wouldn't be no good for that, but it actually is good for quite a few uses. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about that because there might be some other opportunities where you could find Alpha Anywhere useful that don't necessarily require large scale cloud deployments. So I'm going to show you some examples of that as well. So let's begin at the beginning with the 3 ways to host your application. So in Alpha Anywhere, you can use Alpha Cloud, as we've explained before, our service. We also have a product called the Alpha Anywhere Application Server for IIS. You can just hop onto our website and purchase one of these. You get a download link and a serial number. And we have another version of the application server simply called the Alpha Anywhere Application Server, but not for IIS. We also have something that I'm sort of referring to as a bonus, and that's a development server. That's sort of built in or baked into every copy of the Alpha Anywhere developer package. And I'm going to show you a little bit about all 3 today. So we'll start with the cloud, where I'm going to spend probably the least amount of time. All right, we've given many cloud pitches here in the past. A lot of you folks are on cloud. There are a lot of benefits to it. But if you look at the basic architecture of the cloud, and I've left out a lot of stuff here, but the very basics are that you get basically 2 servers, 2 Alpha Anywhere application servers for IIS, running on 2 separate machines. Those are behind a load balancer. So when traffic comes in, the load balancer decides which server to send it to. It could be round robin. It could just be based on how busy server A is versus server B, and so on. Now, because this is cloud hosting, it has 2 other kind of cool advantages. One is it's offsite, so someone else is taking care of all the hardware and stuff for you. The other thing is that it is elastic, so you can set it up so that if server A and server B get very busy, it could automatically add a server C or a server D or a server E, a concept that we call elasticity. So we have elastic computing when you're dealing with Alpha Cloud hosting. Great for enterprise solutions, But not everything has to be an enterprise solution. There might be some solutions that you have for companies that you would say smaller than bigger enterprises, a small business, or even departments where Alpha Cloud hosting might be fine, but you could also consider hosting yourself in-house. And I want to tell you a little bit about that today. So taking a look at the next option for hosting, we have the Alpha Anywhere for IIS hosting solution. And so this is what I refer to as the AAIIS server. Now notice my cloud this time is a little bit, it's not as dark because you might be hosting it in a data center, like you might be hosting it at GoDaddy, or ZebraHost is a very popular web host that a lot of people use because they specialize in alpha hosting. Or you might very well just be running it in your own network operations center or in your own office. So it doesn't necessarily have to be hosted off-site. Now, the Alpha Anywhere IIS server, as you saw on the previous slide, is basically the same thing that we use in cloud hosting, only instead of two, you can get away with just using one. The reason we go with two is because cloud is supposed to have a stronger, more robust infrastructure. So we always want to have some sort of backup to ensure uptime. And over the years, Alpha Anywhere cloud uptime has really been tremendous. All right, but let's take a look at what that Alpha Anywhere for IIS host server really is. Because it's really, first of all, as far as product names go, and I was around when they named it, it is a terrible product name. It's way too long. Alpha Anywhere Application Server for IIS. We wanted to give it some, in here in marketing, some real easy name like IIS server or something like that. But technical folks pushed back, and I think they were right, because I think it's important to understand that this isn't one thing. It's actually two different things. Part of it is Alpha. That's the Alpha Anywhere Application Server for IIS. But really, all it does is serve applications. In other words, run applications. It doesn't serve web pages. This is connected or coupled tightly with the IIS web server, which I think all of you have probably heard of. It comes with Windows. It runs about 10% of the websites out there. It's actually a slightly declining share, more than that if you're talking about web servers that run on the Microsoft platform. That's higher percentage than 10%. But it's a very good, robust, well thought through web server. And as such, it runs really fast. It's very performative. So we use this as part of our solution. So when page requests come in for HTML pages or for graphics or for whatever, it does exactly what a web server should do, and that is serve those pages back. Just basically handle each of the requests and send them back to the user. Now, if those pages contain some code in them, like XBasic code, for example, the IIS web server doesn't know how to handle that, but it knows to pass that code over to the Alpha Anywhere Application Server for IIS, where it does the processing and it hands it back to the IIS web server, and then it's delivered back to the end user. So this all works seamlessly. The user doesn't really know that there's two different bits here. IIS is the part that's doing the web serving, and Alpha Anywhere is the part that's doing the back-end server processing. But there is yet a third type of application server, and this was our original one that we simply call the Alpha Anywhere Application Server. We also refer to it sometimes as the standalone server or the classic server. And this is in fact a one-piece solution. So yes, it's an application server that can run code, but the other thing it can do is it can also serve web pages. So it's as if it had its own Microsoft IIS server built right in. So the question is, why wouldn't everyone just want this solution? It's all in one, you don't need two pieces. And the reason is that while we did create this first and we ended up creating our own web server, we decided that it would be better to let a big company like Microsoft actually handle that portion that has to do with web serving, since it's such a standard thing. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel, let IIS keep up with it. And as a result, and the other important thing is that the IIS web server, the way it's been coded, and this is really inside baseball, but I'll let you know, is that it's a compiled solution. We use an interpreted solution for our web server. So basically it requires more processing to do the same thing. IIS is simply allows you to have more throughput. Now, of course, that all depends, whether or not that's important, depends on how much load you have to begin with. If you only have a few people hitting it or a dozen people hitting it, it may be fine just to use the Alpha Anywhere application server, or you might want to just put it on a bigger or better machine. So there's all kinds of options. We're actually going to talk about this one here today because it's part of another thing that we call the Alpha Anywhere development server. Built into your copy of even the community edition is this web server. It automatically comes in that code. And it's basically the Alpha Anywhere application server, but with two limitations. Limitation one is that it is not supposed to be for commercial use. In other words, this is really just for development and testing. If you want to use it like for a hobby project, that's fine. If you're using it because you want to demonstrate to a client an application that you're building on, that's absolutely fine. You want to use it during development, of course, that's what it's for. It's not meant for deployed commercial applications. That's just a licensing thing, but we ask that you buy a proper server if you're going to do that, as opposed to just use our free one. But the other thing is that our development server, to sort of enforce this policy, is limited to simply 5 concurrent sessions at once, which means that only 5 people could be using your application at the same time until there's, and once someone stops using it, you have to wait for their session to expire, which is usually about 15 minutes, before a slot is freed up and a new person can join and start using your application. That limitation, of course, goes away if you get a license, and then you have the proper Alpha Anywhere application server. So we're talking about this as sort of being our most limited version. It's limited in terms of speed. It's limited in terms of number of people. It's limited in terms of use case. That said, it's still a pretty impressive server that you might actually have quite a lot of use for. So I'm going to start by going over the options that are available in the development server. And then we're going to start seeing it in action. And then at the end, or actually, if I do this right, all of you will be able to access my development server from your cell phones, wherever you are during this webinar. So see if we can get that to work, which would be cool. All right, so let's pop over to that machine that I showed you earlier. This is that HP machine that's running in the closet right here. And I'm running Alpha Anywhere. Now, while I'm at the web projects control panel of Alpha Anywhere, I can go up here into web and choose development server. And that'll open up this dialog box with a whole bunch of options. I'm not going to explain everything that's on here, but I will take you on the tour of the things that I think you'll find to be the most important and most interesting. To begin with, this is obviously a tabs dialog box, so you have different options up here at the top. But let's start over here on the left, and this has to do with threads, thread utilization. This is really just showing you what is currently going on. It's nothing really to set here. Over here in general, you can decide on what the name is for your server. I just left it as the machine name, for which I just happened to call mine Quad i5 because I'm unoriginal. This was a i5 quad machine. The next part is the development route. Development route is where files are going to be served from the hard drive of your computer or maybe some other drive. By default, this is set to A5 web route. Page extensions are things like .a5w, .html, and other things that your server is allowed to set. I usually just leave this alone. Default page is interesting. So if someone goes just to your web server and doesn't put in a / and a page name, it's up to Alpha Anywhere to decide what page should be served up to that user. So here is the list of things that it looks for. If you have an index.a5w page, it's going to serve that one up first. But if it goes and looks for it and doesn't find one of those, it's going to then look for one called default.a5w. And it's basically just going to go down this list. If it doesn't find any at the end of the list, then it's going to give the user an error message saying that directory browsing is not allowed, provided that you have not re-enabled directory browsing, meaning that you just it can't find any page, but it doesn't want you poking around any further for security reasons. Now you can add different ones. Like for example, let's say you had a login page and you wanted that to always be the first page which is signed up. You could just add that login page right here by clicking add and typing in that page name. And likewise, you can change the order in which these default pages are served by using these up and down arrow keys. So right now, index.html will attempt to be served before index.a5w. Okay. So as we're going to go back here, we'll take a look and let's move on to another page. The other ones here automatically start server. That's fine. Every time you open up Alpha Anywhere, it launches the web server. Could be handy. Enable security framework. We've gone over that one before. I'm not going to talk about that today. The logging page, I'm not going to go over much, but this is great if you're trying to figure out why your application is running slowly or why people are getting errors. You know, when things happen, these can be written down into a log. You know, who requested what, when did an error occur, what was the error, and all that. Whole bunch of things. So if you do have issues, especially if you're working with our tech support department to help figure out things, often you'll go into this section here. Alerts is kind of cool because the server can actually alert you when something is going on. It's one that I typically don't like to trust. And the reason is I like to have a separate checker because it seems to me that if this goes down, if your development server goes down, your ability to get alerted might also go down. So I tend to use like a service like Uptime Robot, which is one that I use personally and would recommend to keep checking on your site if it's one that you need to be notified if something goes down. Access and errors. This is where we're talking about directory browsing. If you want to allow people to go looking through what's in your A5 web root, you know, you can by allowing it. Typically, it's not allowed. It's considered to be a security issue, but it may not be, depending on your use case. For the error pages, these are all custom error pages. Like, for example, a 404 is probably the one we're all the most familiar with. If someone goes and tries to load a page that doesn't exist, they get a 404 error, and that 404 error is automatically generated by Alpha Anywhere. But you may instead decide to make a custom 404 error, maybe a nicer looking 404 error that says, you know, I'm sorry, we couldn't help you. You know, here are some other resources that might be useful to you. You know, you can report this error to our admin. You can do all kinds of things and make a really nice 404 page. And you would just put that in there and the server would know to serve that one up separately. TLS and SSL, I won't go through, but basically it's for making a secure end-to-end connection between the browser and your server. And it is basically a must nowadays. On a local area or network, maybe you wouldn't go secure, but maybe you would. So I tend to recommend it for everything using TLS and SSL. Performance, don't touch this. This is one of the things that if you're working with one of our engineers, we can help you out and sort of optimize this based on your load. Usually you don't have to touch this at all, so that's fine. And advanced, the one thing I would point out here that's interesting is the ability to set the session timeout. So like I said, remember with the developer edition, you've got a limit of 5 people who can use the server at the same time. Or can use your application at the same time. We're allowed 5 simultaneous sessions. When they stop typing, clicking, or making requests to the server, a countdown timer basically starts. At the end of 15 minutes, their session ends, and if they reconnect, they're basically starting in on a new session. You can set how long that'll be. 15 minutes is usually a good point. You might make it a little bit shorter. You might make it longer. So it's really up to you. And this has to do with publishing your application to a remote server. I'm not going to go over that today because we're going to be doing everything local on that little machine that I just showed you earlier. So the development server has got a lot of powerful options. Oh, and the other thing you can do if you wanted to is if you do buy a license for the Alpha Anywhere application server, you can actually just paste that same license here into your developer edition and unlock it and basically turn your development server into a full server. That's what I've done here. Usually you don't do this because usually you're just using it for testing and you're going to save that server for your own application server that you're going to run for a production environment or something like that. But anyway, it is an option. the pain in the neck thing is that, in order for this to run, you have to open up Alpha Anywhere. You need to make sure the development server is running. And so basically Alpha Anywhere needs to stay open if you want your development server to stay open. It isn't a standalone sort of thing. All right, I hope I haven't confused people too much there. So let's go on, let's see. Oh, so let me see. I was just taking a look to see if there are any questions so far. And there is one comment here, which is Uptime Robot is great, but don't use it on an app hosted on Alpha Cloud or use up all your compute units. Yeah, that could be. So you might want to, yeah, if you're doing an Uptime Robot on, depending on how often Uptime Robot pulls and what you're having Uptime Robot do, that could very well be an issue. So we'll play the by ear. I'm not going to really go too far into Uptime Robot today, but you might want to check it out. All right, so I didn't really make any changes here, so I'm just going to leave this alone. And now let's talk about that development server, which I have up and running now. In other words, what can I actually go and do with it? Well, there's three sort of levels of access that you can have when you're working with a server. And I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint because I have a slide that talks about that. The first is called localhost access. So this is when you are using a browser on the same machine that you are running your Alpha Anywhere server. So if you were to look up into the URL of your browser, it would literally say localhost : and then the rest of the URL that goes to your server to open up a particular page. This is, there's really nothing you need to do to set this up, and it's really easy. The next is LAN access. So imagine you want to allow someone else on your local area network to take a look at your application. This absolutely can be done. And one of the most common examples of it is if you are developing a mobile application. So you're developing a mobile application on your desktop, and then you pull out your phone to check it out. Your phone is a different device, but it's probably going to be on the same Wi-Fi network. So it can still actually talk to your server, and it does that by basically punching a hole in the, by you opening a hole on the firewall, opening a port on the firewall that will allow that local access to the Alpha Anywhere application server. I'll show you about that in a minute. And the last part is the internet access. Like, how do you get to it from outside of the local area network? How does someone get, let me see, I've got Robin here today who says that he's in a campsite. He's got limited internet signal, but he's watching this. So hopefully we'll see if he can look at our web application later today from out there in the wild. All right, so let's take a look. All right, so let's go back into our application and let's start taking a look at each of those different levels of access, starting with the simplest one, which is the local access. So I'm going to go ahead. I've created an A5W page called Hello World. There's the source. Just says Hello World. Pretty easy. I'm going to close that down. And then I'm just going to say I want to do a live test. And I want to run my Hello World page. And when I'm done, yeah, that should be fine. Just click OK. And it should launch, and it did. It launched a browser. And if you look at the URL in the browser, it says localhost : 1580. That's the port that the Alpha development server is running on. /_ live test, hello world, and all that. Now, if you recall, things get served from something in your hard drive called A5 webroot. So if I went to A5 webroot, sure enough, I can see that there is a live test here. I could double click on that. And hello world should be one of my pages. If I scroll down, I think I'll find it. There it is. Great. And so that's what's running. Now this is localhost, meaning this is just my machine. So if I leave my machine, let's say I come back here to my Mac, which is a completely different machine, and I open up Safari. So open a window and I type that in, what I'm going to get is a whole bunch of nothing because I don't have that running here on my machine. So the question is, how do I take it a step further and actually access it from the local area network? Well, I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to go back in here to alpha. And this time when we do our live test, we're going to do a remote test. And when I do a remote test, it's going to give me a different kind of URL. The URL it's going to give me, instead of saying localhost, is going to include either the host name of my computer on the internet, the quad i5 name, or it'll include the IP address of my computer on the internet. So like this one here. And I tend to use IP address over machine name, although the problem is that if I don't have this assigned to a permanent IP address, and let's say I reboot this machine, it may grab a different IP address, and I'd need to know that. But I wouldn't worry about that here for this example. So we're just going to go ahead and copy that to the clipboard. And it's been copied to the clipboard. And now I'm going to go back here into Safari. And instead of localhost, I'm going to paste this URL right to the top. And as you can see, it has got my local area networks IP for that computer that's sitting out in the closet, .1.19. If I run that, it works. Now, if you try that at home, it may not work. And the reason is I had to tell my computer, my Windows PC here, to allow traffic from my LAN onto that port. And I did that just using the firewall settings. So if you're using the Windows firewall, which is probably the most common, I'll just show you the example in Windows 10 how you do that. Here we are in Windows Security, and I just looked up firewall as my search here in Cortana. And I went down into Advanced Settings, say yep. And in Advanced Settings, I can have different inbound and outbound rules. Here we want to set an inbound rule, and we're going to send an inbound rule for that port 1580. Now, how did I know it was 1580? Well, it was in the URL, but the other thing is that is actually how my development server is set up. Let me show you that. Let's go into web and back into development server. And you'll see here you get a choice of port. Now, 1580 is one that Alpha Anywhere generated for me automatically. It tends to generate just a high number so that doesn't conflict with any other software that may already be installed on your computer. The typical port for traffic is 443 if you're doing a TLS or SSL encrypted traffic. Not going to worry about that right at this moment. We're going to use the port that it assigned, this 1580. Okay, so let's go back into settings. Oops, I think I closed what I needed. So let's go back here. Yes. And you'll see I could create a new rule by right-clicking on inbound rules and saying new rule. You can also click here for new rule. You'll see I've already created this rule. It's one of many. And you can sort here by port. Now this is kind of funny because it's sorted alphabetically, even though you typically go by number. So if I'm looking for 1580, it's kind of like not in the order you'd expect. Let's go ahead and I'll scroll down though and we'll find it. There's my 1580 port right there. And as you can see, I named it Alpha Test Server. I told it to basically allow any incoming traffic through the protocol TCP on port 1580. And that basically tells it, okay, 1580 is open, it's ready to receive traffic. And the thing that's there to receive traffic happens to be the Alpha Anywhere application server. All right, so that's that. So that needs to be switched on if you are going to access it from the local area network. Now, let's imagine that we didn't just want to access it from the local area network, we wanted to access it from the internet. So not only would I have to, and I've shown how to do this in prior guides before, but it's becoming more and more a pain in the neck to set up. Part of it is because of how ISPs are setting policies and permissions. So with internet access, you do need to, of course, have the firewall on that machine set so that allows incoming traffic. But chances are that firewall is behind your internet router, and your internet router also has a firewall, and it also needs to know, not only does it have a firewall, but it also needs to know when incoming traffic is incoming, where should it go? So if something came to port 1580, you would set up what was called a port forwarding rule that would take that traffic and send it over to the internal IP address of that machine. So you need to have both the firewall and router permissions set up. Okay, with me so far, I hope. Anyway, the other thing is that many internet service providers, and I have actually 2 of them coming to my house, actually try to prevent you from doing this. They'll block the common ports, for example, port 80 and port 443, like I said before, because they don't really want you running an internet server off of their service. They want you to upgrade to a more expensive, business plan or something with, and that could be now the difference between spending, say, 50 or 60 bucks a month for internet access to now spending $300 a month for internet access. So often their permissions will basically not let you do that. But there is one other way of doing it, and that is by creating something called a tunnel. And this is something that sort of struck me a while ago, that there must be a way to do this in Alpha Anywhere, and as it turns out, there is. Maybe, I don't know how many people have used like Go to My PC or Log Me In or something like that. And you'll notice that, in a corporate environment, you can install Go to My PC. And where the IT people might stop you from like opening up your computer for remote access, right? Because they'd have to set up firewall and permissions and stuff like that. You notice something like Go to My PC just works. And the reason it just works is because Go to My PC and Log Me In and all those are actually pieces of software that are running on your computer that have a constant link back to the servers at Log Me In or some other place. So this is what a tunnel does. A tunnel lets you connect your computer directly through a server using a piece of software. And the one that I found, which I thought is really quite cool, is one called Ngrok. So I'm going to show you how I used Ngrok today to make my development server open to the outside world for looking at traffic. So Ngrok, it's got a lot of different names, but it calls itself basically an ingress as a service. In other words, ingress data coming into your machine, and they are a service that lets you do that. So when you use Ngrok, there are 2 pieces. There's a piece that you install on your computer, and then there's their server, their service that actually serves the data. So your users aren't connecting directly to you, they're connecting to Ngrok, and Ngrok is then connecting to you. So let's go back to my computer and I will show you what happened when I installed Ngrok. So let me close down this, get that out of the way. Oh, and while I do it, let's go to a better Hello World example. So let's pop in, I'll show you why in a second. Web components. So I did write that little Hello World thing, that's fine today, but I thought I'd make a nicer Hello World one. So I made a little UX component called Hello World. It's called the Hello Worldinator. You could set the language and it will output the text of Hello World in the language that you selected. Not a very hard application, but still pretty cool. So I'm going to do a remote test on that. I don't care, fast preview, and I'm just going to copy it to the clipboard. I'm going to go back to my Mac, go back into Safari, paste that in, and there's my Hello Worldinator. All right, cool. It's actually kind of a cool little thing. Look, let's see it. Check. It'll tell you that. All right, there's a reason for this distraction because this is actually what you're going to load on your phone in just a minute. All right, headed back onto Alpha Anywhere. We're going to take a look, actually not Alpha Anywhere, headed out to my PC. We're going to go take a look at Ngrok. So Ngrok runs from the command line. So I basically typed in one command, and I think it was something like Ngrok space HTTP space 1580. So in other words, run Ngrok on port 1580. When I did that, the screen cleared, and I got this here in my command prompt. And it shows you here how the forwarding is working. So they say, okay, that's cool. We've set up a URL for you, conveniently called https://30a5209.630.228.ngrok.free.app. And we are going to send that over to your local host. And because this is localhost, I don't even have to open a firewall port on my computer. to do this. So I'd love to go ahead and copy this and paste it using Control-C, but as you can see, Control-C is the one there. Whoops, looks like people are already trying to type that in. Good for you. Very nice. Not so fast, though. I'm going to go over here, and it shows me what my web interface is, and that's 127.001.4040. So I'm going to open that up. And this is what I have running locally. All right, cool. And so here's my URL. I can just copy it out of there. And I'm going to go back to my Mac. And I'm going to replace this first part with my Ngrok. So there's the Ngrok. That should take me to my A5 web root, and then everything else should load. So if I've done that right, let me put that on my clipboard, and I click OK. There we go. It's now loading right through Ngrok. Okay. So there we go. German, Spanish. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and share that URL with you guys, and we're going to put Ngrok to the test and see how many people can hit it, how slow it is, and things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to, let's use Bitly. There's a couple different ways to do this, but I like Bitly. I'm going to go to Bitly, and I'm going to create a new link. New link. And I'm going to paste it here. And it's going to be hello. Notice this is the part that I really like. As I began to type it, it already looked at that and saw what the page title was and started to fill it in here, which I thought was neat. But I'm going to call this Hello World Webinar. Click Create. All right, and there's my Bitly link, and I'm going to say Create QR Code. And there's my QR code. So any of you with a phone or a camera would like to go ahead and scan that code. I'm going to do it right now. And we'll see what happens. Now, for many of you, you're going to get a message which says, hey, this is an Ngrok code. Are you sure you want to proceed? Go ahead. That's there intentionally. Go ahead and click OK to get past that. So the question is anyone else now seeing the Hello Worldinator on their phone? I will wait for answers here. So was it? Yep, able to scan the code. Excellent, wonderful. So let's go back into here and take a look. Oh yeah, there we go. A whole bunch of people are connecting. Now at some point I might run out of connections that I'm allowed to use on my free account, but I think they actually gave me quite a few. Let's see. Got it. I'm in. Yes. Oh, wonderful. Wow. It looks like over a dozen people came right in. All right. Fantastic. And I think it only took like a second or two for it to load. In fact, I've got the metrics on it right here. So Ngrok, as you can imagine, is also got, as it's called free, does have some paid options. But what I really liked is I thought that the pricing was really quite reasonable. If we go over to Ngrok, and oops, let's go into, let me head back to my Mac. And we'll go to the Ngrok page, and we say products. Oops, sorry, pricing. So this is the free one that I'm using right here. And I love one of its features is called ephemeral random domains. That makes it sound so nice, meaning we're going to give you ones that are impossible to understand and they're going to keep changing. Like that's a feature. At the $8 a month rate, you can actually get a custom domain, or you can use a standard Ngrok subdomain, which is probably what you'd want to use if you wanted to use this for any type of real work. And but the rest of it is pretty good. So you know, I found this really to be a really easy way to set up. There are other ways. You can do things using VPNs like NordVPN and other VPNs. Install your own VPN and then bypass the restrictions based on your router. But this one is pretty cool, and I thought you guys would enjoy it. So that is pretty much it for me. I wonder if there are any other questions or comments here today. And if not, I do have one question that I wanted to get to that was written in just before the webinar, and it was a JavaScript question. All right, cool. So I'm going to actually drop into that JavaScript question. So the question had to do with setting values in a field using JavaScript, and I may have totally gotten the question wrong, but we'll see. Let me find where I was at. Customer with detail, right? So the question was when they enter in, so they've got a list. The list has a detail view, and the detail view has got a date field in it, and they would like to automatically enter a default date when the new record is created. My solution isn't quite right because I have it entering a new date just simply when that field is blank, which may not be what you want. But if you take a look at the JavaScript that I did, I think you might be able to make it work for your situation. If not, of course, always send an email to guides@alphasoftware.com. So let's start out here in my list. So I built a list. The list is basically the Northwind customer list, ID, company name, contact name, and all that. And it does have a detail view, as you can see here. So if I go into working preview, all right, and I choose any one of these, you'll see that it appears here in the detail view. Now I did something really weird, and I actually made this contact title a date. I changed it to a date field. It'll display whatever the date is behind it, but I changed it to a date field because it lets you. So I'm going to delete that date field, and I'm going to go to a different field. And what was this one? Here. And now I'm going to go back to the one that I just updated. And you'll see contact title is blank. And as soon as I put my mouse or click on or give focus to contact title, it's now filled in the current date. So this isn't exactly what you wanted to do, but I think that you'll see how to do what you're trying to do. So let's go back into design, and I just want to show you the JavaScript behind that. So in this particular field, contact title, I set up a on focus event. So in other words, as soon as the cursor enters that title, and the focus event has a little bit of JavaScript in it. The first thing is it checks to see whether or not the contact title has anything in it. And if it doesn't, it sets the date. And really, here's the part that does the date setting. And I think this is the part actually that you may have needed, because you can't just set, for example, contact title equal to date. You need to have it. You need to know the handle of the object. So I'm going to grab. Let me grab this here. Control C. And I'm just going to throw a button here on the form. Add a control. Add a button. Button. And it's going to be called set date. And I am going to go and do this as text mode, and I'm going to paste in this. So all this does is it finds the contact title field, it gets its handle, or its object handle, and then it sets it to this portion here, new date, which is JavaScript for today's date. So if I click OK on that, and I go back into working preview, let's see, regardless of whether or not the list is there or if it's full, I should just be able to scroll down, click set date, and bang, it sets it right there. So really, and let me show you where you find these, because this is really, I find this really confusing for new people. When you want to set a value of a field or a control, you would think, well, maybe there's like an action JavaScript way of doing it, like set field value, but we don't have that. Instead, we make you do it using JavaScript, but we give you a big helping hand here because we've included some insert UX component methods, some component methods that you can use. And in particular, get value and set value are the ones you'll typically lose. So let's say we wanted to set the value of an object. I would just choose set value. And then I get to set the value. What should I put in it? So I'm going to put in Let's put in Fred. And what control do I want to set? And all I have to do, while this help is up here, I can right click right there where it says UX control name, and I can choose what I want. So I'm going to choose, say, contact name. And I'll say save. So now that's what this button does, is it sets the first name to Fred if I've done it properly. And I'm in working preview. I should scroll down where it says set date. It's actually setting the name. So you'll want to use that property when you're setting those things. So when you insert a new record and you want to set the date to today, you'll need to find that event that is triggered when you set a new record. So you might have a button, for example, that you have included called Add New Record, one of the standard buttons that come as part of the define, I think it's the define controls. List navigator, list, record count. I think there's a new record button. So let's say you added a new record button. Record, and you have to, I think you have to tell it what thing you're in. You could add that as the very next, one thing you could do is just add that as the very next line to insert that. That is an option. If that doesn't work for you, just send in an email. We'll test it out outside of the webinar, and we'll get a working solution for you. All right, wonderful. Well, that looks like it for questions. Thanks very much, everyone, for showing up. I hope you found today to be helpful. If you have suggestions for webinar topics or just simply questions about Alpha Anywhere, please send them to guides, GUIDES @alphasoftware.com. And I hope to see us, hope that you can join us next week. I believe, if I'm looking at my calendar correctly, that we will be joined by Robin Bennett from Start Software, who always has really interesting things to show off and a lot of good, deep knowledge. So I hope to see you then. Till then, take care and stay well. Bye-bye.